Is Draco Malfoy actually good at being a bully? Is Trelawney actually good at being a teacher? Is Hagrid actually qualified to be a teacher? Is Dumbledore actually running this school? So many questions and fun side discussions with my guest in this episode, Dan from Hogwarts, a podcast. Hi, welcome to Belated Binge Harry Potter, the re-binge podcast that doesn't take itself or the books too seriously. I'm Zach, I'm your host, and I didn't read this series until my mid-20s. And today we get back into our chapter discussions of Prisoner of Azkaban with Chapter 6, Talons and Tealeaves.
The Belated Binge Podcast.
Before we get into it, there will be spoilers, obviously. There might be language. We'll see. Shout out to Katie holding it down for the Bonus Binge Squad on Patreon, which you can join for shout outs in all the episodes, early access, and bonus content. And right now, I'm excited to introduce my guest for this episode. It's the host of Hogwarts, a podcast, Dan! How are you,
Thank
Dan?
you for having me. Thank you. It's been a minute since we've been trying to get this together for a while now. So
a minute is, I would love to do the math because I think it's been over a year now.
probably
We've been trying to get this going, which is my fault, actually. And I've admitted on the podcast before, I think, or on somebody's podcast. Oh, I think it was when I went on Content and Capable. Sam and I were talking about the scheduling of guests and getting interviews and all of that kind of stuff, and how I'm just awful at it. And you are the only person that I've ever had to cancel on. And I felt so bad about doing that.
it's all right, man. I understand the scheduling troubles, so it's hard, man.
Well, it's ironic. I bring it up now because it's very ironic. It was a chapter that we were going to do back in Chamber of Secrets originally. And that day, my kid and my wife were sick. And I was like, I just can't record today. And I was very upset with having to do that to you. And guess what's happening right now?
Are they both sick now?
They
too?
are both sick right now.
Man.
And we are down here talking about Harry Potter. What a difference a year makes. Anyways, let's start with your Harry Potter story. How did you come to be into this fandom and become a Potterhead yourself?
Yeah, it's a little roller coaster of a ride. I am of the age where I was about 11 when I started reading it, and the books were coming out about that time. And I remember my 5th grade teacher actually started reading Sorcerer's Stone in class, and I kind of got hooked on it then.
That seems like so many people in this fandom story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's wild to me that so many people like just latched onto this story that was read to them by a teacher. I must have went to the wrong school because I'm also of age. Definitely nobody reading it to me.
Well, mine is a little bit more unique of a story too, because I don't know if you remember back in the day, there was a lot of backlash on Harry Potter because magic and wizardry and this devilry.
Yeah.
I went to a Catholic grade school. So the fact that a teacher in a Catholic grade school was the one to introduce me to this is kind of bizarre. But yeah, that's kind of how it started.
It's very wild because I too also went to a Catholic grade school at this time, and that is probably precisely why none of the teachers read this to me. Oh, that's really funny. Did we go to the same school? Just have different teachers?
We might have. Yeah, and then I kind of fell out of it for a while. After Goblet of Fire, there was a big break between books, and I just kind of fell out of it. And then years later, I picked up Order of the Phoenix and was like, do I still like this? Spoiler, I still like this. So I just got into it again.
It'd be really funny if you didn't. You were like, actually, my podcast is a hate podcast. All
Yeah,
I do is trash Harry Potter.
that'd be super aggressive. Yeah.
A little bit. The name would not be indicative of the content.
No, no.
Speaking of the podcast, tell us about your kick-ass Harry Potter podcast.
Yeah, so it's me and a group of my friends, and we literally just go chapter by chapter through the series, kind of like what you're doing. I know
We're
exactly.
original. We're original.
I know very much so. Um, so yeah, and we just basically break down. I think one of my guests described it as AP English, where we kind of just deep dive into the chapter and kind of break down everything. And one of the things I particularly like doing is taking characters, which one of which we might be talking about today a little bit.
Potentially.
Yeah, that aren't very well liked by the fandom and kind of go through their point of view. Because I
Mm,
know when we read it as kids, we read the books all through Harry's eyes because that's
mhm.
kind of how you're designed to read the books. So you're reading everything through the eyes of a teenage child, and now
Yeah.
we're adults. So how does our adult kind of filter
Mm.
get through Harry Potter? And it's like maybe some of these characters that we always hated, maybe now we have more of an understanding about where they're coming from. So it's one of the things I like doing on the podcast, kind of taking a different angle on it and seeing if we come to a new understanding or if we're like, nah, we hate that character. He's awful. Whatever. So
I think we'll have plenty of opportunity to explore at least somewhat in this particular chapter because we at least have one character in this chapter that is, how do I describe, complete shit.
we've had one or two disagreements on my podcast about this particular character, and I'm the cause of it. So this will be fun. This will be
Good.
fun.
Good. I like it. I like it. Well, before we jump into this chapter, in case you were obliviated or you got your Hogwarts letter late, let's shove our faces in that white, liquidy substance of our pensieve. Harry finally got on the Hogwarts Express in our last chapter, chapter 5, in case you needed help counting, because I can't keep them straight, only to come face to face with, well, depression in physical form. But there was good news, at least. We no longer have to hear the phrase Azkaban guards anymore because the audience actually knows what a Dementor is. So now the whole wizarding world does too and can change the way that they speak about it immediately. I can't tell you how frustrating that was for me at every moment. We also got to meet Remus Lupin. Harry finally got some family, which is a theme of Dumbledore's master plan for this particular book, if you ask me. Now, let's do Priori Ink and Chapter, aka the point where our wands connect, not the tips, just the streams, so we can recap what went down in the chapter that we just read. This week, Chapter 6, Talons and Tealeaves. Well, it starts kind of annoying with Draco doing fainting impressions, making fun of Harry. So let's just get into this particular question because I have a feeling you might answer this slightly different than what maybe I anticipated before you came on. Where are you in Draco's level of competence as a school age bully specifically?
I think he's a little behind, quite honestly. I think he's a typical 13-year-old kid,
Mm-hmm.
but still the fainting thing I feel like is a little beneath him. I think he could do better at this point.
Yeah,
I think he could do better.
it
I
feels
think
juvenile.
this is more of like a 9 to 10-year-old kind of level, and he's better than that. He's better. I expect
Yeah,
more.
yeah. Did you think you were going to come on and the first question you got asked about the chapter was rating his skills as a bully?
I had a feeling Draco might come up early, but I did not. I did not expect rating his bullying skills. He's done better too. This is not up to his par. Not up to his par.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. And we're nothing if not cancelable around here. We don't hear from Pansy Parkinson very often, but she's in here too. And
She's in here a lot.
Yeah, she gets a lot, and I find her character potentially more annoying than I do Draco's, because at least Draco's consistently here. She just pipes in every once in a while, and I could do without the pug face.
She's the epitome of like a follower, like just a sheep that just
Mm.
follows the leader. Like Draco is clearly running the show, if not in this particular class of Slytherins, but like almost the entire school of Slytherins. It seems like he's the one running everything.
It's funny you say that, because I often wonder how much of this shit is flying like house wide, and how much of this is just him and his little like clique within it, because we really only hear a few names surrounding him
Right.
like the whole time, and I kind of wonder if he's not just like the big dog of his five or six people, and he tries that with like somebody else in the common room or whatever, and they're like, dude, I don't care who your dad is.
Well, yeah. So I think it's more like, so let's say some random sixth year who we don't know
Hmm.
hears Draco. And I think he like rolls his eyes and will be like, ha. But like, man, if your dad wasn't who he is, I would like, I would pound you right now. This is annoying. Like, come on.
If only your father wouldn't hear about this.
Exactly. Exactly.
Fred and George let us know that Draco ran and hid in their train compartment when he saw the Dementor, which is pretty much typical Draco hypocrisy. And before we leave for divination, we get a small divination foreshadow moment where Ron catches a glimpse of Hermione's schedule.
Hmm.
3 classes at 9 a.m., which doesn't seem all that possible. I wonder what could be maybe happening. But Ron is the first one to notice and actually express some concern about it. And Hermione shrugs it off and says she's worked it out with McGonagall. So there's like a few things that are kind of here. Obviously, this is a foreshadow to the rest of the book, time turners and all of that stuff. Did I mention spoilers at the beginning? But this is also a pretty ridiculous moment for me. And since you're new to this, I'll say that fairly often when I mention things in the story that I find ridiculous and not making a lot of sense. We've got a powerful object with its own room in the Department of Mysteries that gives you the power to time travel and manipulate the outcomes of everything. And it
Yeah.
can apparently be obtained by a school teacher to give to a 13-year-old child because her class schedule has conflicts. Can you make this make any sense at all?
It's a pretty egregious cheat code. It's like if there's ever an item that's very OP, overpowered, it's this, which is ultimately why they kind of get rid of it later on.
Immediately.
They're like, yeah, we really shouldn't have this as a thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's ridiculous. And the how many other students had this ability like given to them? There had to be some. I mean, we get, we hear about Percy getting so many OWLs. There's only one way he could have done that. Barty
I don't
Crouch Jr. I mean, it had to be given to other people, but yeah, this is too much. It's
Yeah,
too much.
you would think that there would have to be some precedent set in order for McGonagall to get this done. Like,
Hmm.
it's probably not the first time, but I have a hard time believing that Percy could have possibly had it, because Percy's too pompous. He would have, like, it wouldn't have been a secret.
Do you think he just signed up for owls on his own then? Just was like, I'll just take a shot at this.
I just think he filled his class schedule, and
Mm.
he just didn't have like two at the same time. He wasn't doing shit like Muggle studies at the same time as like arithmancy or whatever. Like, he was just gonna go to arithmancy. He didn't give a shit about
I don't
Muggle
even think
studies.
he doesn't strike me as the one to even do Muggle studies because I think he
No.
resents his dad for it. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I think he just did the absolute maximum coursework that you possibly could, given the confines of, time.
sure.
As is my I would love to I would love to go back to Marauders era and see if there was any potential Time Turner-esque shenanigans that we could potentially like uh gleam from that era, as if like, because let's say they made a Marauder show, if anyone was gonna get it or whatever, they'd give Lily Potter or Lily Evans, a
Sure.
time turner or something um to do that. Or what could be fun is Lupin.
Yeah, that's the one that'd be interesting because Lupin could probably do it academically,
Mm-hmm.
but then you run the risk of James and Sirius, who are also extremely intelligent in their own right,
They
but
are.
they're extremely mischievous too. So then you like run the risk of them convincing Lupin to give them a time turner, and that would be Snape's worst nightmare or worst memory if you get into a later chapter in the books. But
No, you're not wrong. I was actually thinking just specifically from like werewolf transformation.
yeah,
Like, how do you hide the kid that has been gnawing and clawing at himself all night? Like, all the wounds and stuff. Maybe he has to heal and then make up time was more. But you're right. Like, the fact that he and the Marauders did so much rule breaking in like just hanging out with their friend as a werewolf, it would be hard to think he could keep that time turner a secret. It'd
no
be great
chance.
if he could.
No chance. They find that out.
Yeah, I think you're right. The other foreshadow here is that Ron is the first and kind of the only person, if I remember correctly, throughout the book that's concerned at all about Hermione and her workload, her well-being, how exhausted she is, where she's passing out and reappearing, and all of that whatnot. A lot of people point to this as like the first inclination of their eventual ship, I guess. And I caught a small glimpse before this when Hermione was petrified out of Ron, but a lot of people say this is the book where Ron starts to like establish that like crush or feelings or whatever. Where does that land for you? Is it too early?
No, I don't think it's too early at all. I think when I was rereading Sorcerer's Stone, it stunned me just how mean he was to Hermione
Oh, yeah.
and how brutal he was. And yeah, I think you're right. I think in Chamber of Secrets it starts to flip. I think it starts to turn. So I don't think Prisoner of Azkaban is too early at all. I think it starts happening fairly early.
Yeah, if I remember, I think it was when she was petrified and in the hospital wing, and like Harry's doing the little investigative thing, and he finds the little note, and all Ron can do is just like stare at her.
Mm-hmm.
He's just like, he seems to be reacting emotionally in that moment, and that for me, I was like, oh, there's the very very early signs of hookup. Please, for the love of God, not yet though, because they're 12. Anyway, where are we? Well, we're off to divination, and we get another little baby divination moment along the way, which I guess makes some sense. If you're writing a chapter predicting the future, you probably should be planting seeds along the way. But it's Sir Cadogan, and I'd completely forgotten how blatantly comedic this character is, because he's barely at all makes his way into the movies, and he's very sparingly used throughout the books, and he's like a portrait version of a Three Stooges character. They like
Accurate.
they like follow him to the classroom, and he basically says to like all of them that if they need a brave picture, he's on call or whatever, which we'll have plenty of moments with him, but I had completely forgotten he was introduced here.
I know you give out house points and stuff on the podcast.
I do.
So I'm gonna take 10 portrait points from him for the sword and pony fails. That can't you can't have it. Can't have it.
No, you gotta be sharp. Sorry,
Nice. Nicely played.
I'm dad. Now we're in divination, and we meet Trelawney.
This is
Her-
where this chapter gets interesting.
It does, but then it also is just maddening to on another level. Hermione already isn't having it though with this bullshit. Trelawney's like, she's like the side act at a carnival or a theme park or something. It's just like she's just throwing out vague predictions
Yeah.
everywhere, hoping that just for one of them to stick so that she looks good. She tries to like study the kids for her mark, I think, that she can plant some kind of something into existence, like telling Neville ahead of time he's going to break a cup. Like, she sees a super clumsy looking nervous kid and tells him he's going to break a cup. Of course he's going to break a cup.
It's like a carnival kind of fortune teller who's like targeted guessing.
Yeah.
Like that's what I kind of see is like it's a carnival game and she's just doing targeted predictions.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the same way that she got Lavender, who seems to be all like googly eyed at the whole subject. That thing you dread is going to happen on 10/16, which I wish we were recording this a couple of weeks ago just to make that stick. Of course, now something's going to happen. Turns out her rabbit died, but no matter what, this was going to be a winner. Because something, any little minor inconvenience that could have happened on that day, she woke up late, she
Failed a test.
Yeah, she failed a test, she dropped her toast, got a pimple, had an argument, stubbed her toe, anything, like literally anything. Any moment, every single person that wakes up on a given day, thank, whoever you pray to for the fact that you woke up, but at some point in that day, you're going to have a moment where you're just like, son of a bitch.
Yep.
And now her moment, she's going to think was like foreseen by her teacher, and it's going to be the biggest, most amazing thing that's ever happened to her. But, let's not get too frustrated with a book written for children. At least not yet. She throws out a bunch. I do think, though, in all of this hoopla, I think I might have caught a little writing mistake, and I want to see if you agree.
Okay.
One of the lines is that she tells Parvati Patil to beware of a red-haired man. She obviously thinks of Ron.
Yep.
And of course, in Goblet of Fire, at the Yule Ball, Ron is a shitbag date. A total pain in the ass.
Yep.
But he goes with her sister.
Sister, yes, that's correct.
Not her. And so it makes me wonder if that was potentially a small oops in the Easter egg, or was it just like,
Maybe Trelawney was gazing in her crystal ball and just mistook the twins. Maybe she's just like, oh, I guess I got the wrong one. I don't know, whatever.
That's fair. I was wondering because I think one of the reasons that this series is so masterfully written from an Easter egg point of view is that when this author was writing stuff, she was often like referring back to previous stuff and like pulling things that seemed innocuous so that she could pay them off. And it felt like she was trying to pull this, and then it didn't quite line up because it wasn't the right sister.
That very easily could be it.
Alas. We do get funny bits though between Harry and Ron, and that ends up being the best part of this whole class during the series. It's them going back and forth, and I particularly like the you're going to be happy or you're going to suffer but you're going to be happy about it. That
was pretty funny.
Yeah, that
was pretty good.
That's a good line. I like it doesn't happen in this chapter though, but I'm a big fan of Ron's just random outlandish predictions that he makes in these homework assignments and then how many of them actually come true.
The dream diaries are ridiculous to me. Like, first of all, you could write anything. Like, anything. How does anybody know? So the fact that they're even struggling with that homework is ridiculous because you could just literally write anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, they come up with some outstanding, crazy stuff.
Yeah, it's good. Ron tells Harry that he's going to work at the Ministry of Magic, which ends up being true, even though it's true. The wrong career path for his character, and I will die on that hill. Not literally. I'm not dying over this book series, but you get my point. I always stand for a short professional Quidditch career followed by Defense Against the Dark Arts professor.
The popular path.
That's
Yeah.
that's that's the one I like. Yeah, I'm not original, um, but I think the thing that I like about that more than just it making a hell of a lot more sense is that it plants the seed for him to become kind of like a Dumbledore reincarnated type of a character that can like consult with the ministry in that sort of thing in a and honestly operate outside the confines of its laws and structure, much like Dumbledore does, in a let's call it cursed child adjacent world where things actually make sense and the plot's not garbage.
Yeah, I'd go with that. Yep.
Okay. Okay. All right. But really the big thing is, the Trelawney.
Yeah. I have thoughts on the whole Trelawney thing. And this is where we got into a lot
Please.
of trouble on my podcast because I pissed off a lot of my guests with what I'm
Great.
about to bring on this. So, here's the thing. I always took the view that Trelawney is ridiculous and absurd and should be immediately discredited and is not really worth my time as a reader. I took that all up until I got to this chapter on my podcast. And then I read the words right out the gate. She says, quote, "I must warn you at the outset that if you do not have the sight, there's very little I will be able to teach you. Books can only take you so far in this field," which is accurate, number one. And number two, kind of sets the whole Trelawney versus Hermione thing right out the gate. It sets the stage for their kind of battle, which I think Hermione's a little off base on because I think Trelawney's right. Books can only take you so far. If you have it, you have it. If you don't, you don't. And then the idea that Trelawney, she obviously has it because she's made two massive prophecies, one prior to the books taking place, and then one in this book later on. That are solid prophecies. She goes into a whole trance-like state. So she's not exactly a fraud because she does have that ability. But in my thing with Trelawney, some of these predictions that you pointed out earlier, Neville in the cup, Lavender in the date, yeah, those are kind of like, I'm just going to throw a dart and hope it hits. There are some others, though, that I think she makes really good predictions, even though she doesn't interpret them well. Like, for example, in this class, she sees the Grim, right? She sees the Grim in the Tealeaves. And later on, she sees the Grim in a crystal ball, I believe. So while she's seeing the Grim, which is a big black dog omen, well, we've seen a big black dog following Harry religiously in this book. I think she sees the right thing, but misinterprets it. And then I think she does that a couple of times throughout the series. She'll later in the books, she'll be flipping tarot cards and she just gets danger, death, attackers. And then she gets the lightning struck tower card and she's like, well, that can't be right. And then she goes through it again and it's the same thing again. And it's like, danger, death, lightning struck tower. And she's like, that can't be true. That can't be true. And she just dismisses it, even though she's getting the signs. So I think my overall grand opinion on Trelawney after reading these books again is I think she's a little misunderstood and she's a little unfairly treated by the fandom as a whole. I know that's a hot take.
It's lukewarm. So here, I can follow you on the vast majority of that. I think the reason that she's so frustrating is her way of going about it. She wants to present herself as above you, and you just don't get it because you don't have the inner eye. But As far as she knows, neither does she. Because the two main prophecies she's actually hit on, she doesn't remember them.
Yep.
She goes fully like out of body experience and is taken over by just prophecy. She has no idea that they've even happened.
Mm-hmm.
So what she knows that she is doing is making all of these like just throwing them out just constantly. And it turns into very much to me like a boy who cried wolf type of a situation where like if she actually does
Yeah.
get something right, because she does. She does have sight. She does get some of this stuff right. But it's all overshadowed by all of the like showy, wrong, blatantly just like uh
Yes.
misguided way, and her attitude to other people where it's like, well, it's hard to care that you got those 4 or 5 right because the 176 that you did before that and made a big show about it were wildly off base. Especially
Sure.
if and we'll get to that in a second, but because I want to hit that Hermione thing. But especially if McGonagall's correct in that she predicts the death of a student every single year. It's like, why is that your thing? And
Flashy,
why?
showy.
Right, like that's all
That's
it
it.
is. Yeah, for her, it's all about the show, and it's like in that's why I think that she loses any level of credibility in her character outside of the premonition she doesn't know she's making, even though some of them, as you say, are correct. She has multiple of them that are correct.
I completely agree with you. I think that the flashy showiness is so unfortunate because I
Yeah.
don't think she needs it.
Mm-mm.
I think, and this is where I do agree with people that she's not maybe the best teacher, although I think she's underrated as a teacher too. But she's not the best teacher because she does all that flashy stuff and she doesn't need it. She could literally just
Mm-hmm.
teach you what a crystal ball is or how the
Right.
tea leaves work or whatever, and that's fine. Like when we just did a chapter where Umbridge is
Ugh.
evaluating her and Umbridge tries to catch her. Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
make a prediction for me, make a prophecy. And you know Umbridge is just teasing her, like, give me something ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And all Trelawney has to do is a McGonagall way of just like, that's not how this works. Please stop interrupting my class. Let me teach. That's all she has
Yeah.
to do. That's not how the site works. That's not how divination works. You're ridiculous. Get out of my way. But she doesn't. She
Nope.
crumbles underneath that pressure and she tries to throw a prediction out there. And I think it's when she meets Dumbledore before the series, when she makes that big prediction or that big
Mm-hmm.
prophecy, she's only meeting with Dumbledore because she's trying to get a job. Like she can't even get a
Yeah.
job based on the prophecies. Like her ancestry means nothing to most people because most people think divination's ridiculous anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So she's at her wit's end at that point. So when she gets this job, that's where she is now as a person is I got to make it look good. I got to try to make it flashy. Wrong way of going about it. But psychologically, I think that's where she's at, which is just unfortunate.
Yeah, if she didn't use it as a way of trying to bring attention to herself, then we'd have a completely different read on that character.
For sure.
But alas,
Yeah.
Hermione is not here for any of this shit.
Nope.
She was out on divination before she walked into the room. So here's my question: she got a time turner so she could take this class. Why?
Because she feels like she has to, I guess. I don't know. I have no idea.
Speaking of
It's
ego, like,
yeah, it's so not her thing. She's so like Trelawney's whole thing is like broaden your minds, and Hermione is like, nope. If it's not like factually right in front of me, I can't do it.
yeah, I have a hard time with this one. Maybe we wouldn't have needed a major plot hole device, but then we wouldn't have, we'd have to write a whole new book climax. But of course, we could not have Hermione in this one. I do enjoy it though. Eventually, when she walks out of this class, that it brings me some joy when that happens. Just because I don't know, you don't expect it out of the nerd.
Yeah, although it does fulfill another Trelawney prediction.
It does.
So
It does. You can look it up. There's plenty of, speaking of nerds, a whole bunch of them
so
have
many.
gone through have gone through like all of her predictions and pointed out ones that she got right throughout the series that seemed so ridiculous at the time that she said them, or just sounded like more of her spouting off random nonsense. But
Mhm.
again, like we said, if she didn't do so much of that, they might actually hit home. Um, Prof McGee, also not a fan.
No.
She's also not a fan of not getting applause for her cat
Yeah. Speaking of
transformation.
teachers being flashy at the beginning of a lesson, I'm sorry, McGonagall. You're trying to get applause. Calm down. Calm
Yeah,
down.
yeah. I don't get that. I get the show of it in the context of the class because she's teaching transfiguration, and I believe this is supposed to be when she's like kicking off turning animals into things, right? And so
Mhm.
she's gonna, show the ultimate animal transfigurate. Like I get that, but the whole like, not that I need it, but that's the only time I've not gotten whatever an ovation or
Oh,
whatever the
she
fuck
wants
she
it. She
says.
wants
Yeah,
all
she
of the
does.
applause.
She wants it. She does. She's just not gonna. Was that the worst accent too? By the way, like that seemed really bad coming out.
Not the
It
worst. Not the
seems real
worst.
bad. I think though. Here's a question that I have about McGonagall. Is she like Hermione, just flat out anti divination,
100%.
or is she anti Trelawney predicting the death of a student every year? These are
Well,
children.
both. She's definitely both. Um, definitely both. But I think you hit it on the head. I think she's very much like Hermione, and if it's not a tangible form of magic, she discredits it.
Yeah, I I think that makes a lot of sense. I also think it makes her Hermione's hero, just
Yeah.
in the flesh. I also had this idea as I was going through this chapter, and I'm going to share it with you and just see if you think this is the stupidest thing that you've ever heard. But it depends on, I guess, where you land on Cursed Child, whether that is a hot steaming pile of garbage or you think it's absolutely canon. Um, that might inform how you react to this. But here's a spin-off show that I feel like we need in an alternate universe. Our trio, as adults, all Hogwarts professors. Harry's teaching Defense Against the Dark Arts, Hermione's teaching Transfiguration, and Ron is teaching I I Wizard's chess, Quidditch. Can he be Hooch? Do they have a phys
He
ed
could
teach?
be Hooch.
Yeah, like he can be Hooch.
I think he could be Hooch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we shoot the show as a workplace sitcom. Are you
Neville, you could have
that?
Neville as herbology, and then you got like four of them.
Right,
That'd be
right.
great.
And I'm sure that Neville would bring a lot of laughter to this show because while he made like the ultimate glow up, as kids probably said 10 years ago and don't
Yep.
say anymore, um but he's still probably as clumsy as all shit even as an adult. Like there
Yeah,
are
bro.
some things you just don't grow out of no matter how many abs you have. So the idea that he could just kind of like come fumbling in with some potted plants and shit, and just into a random scene, and Ron's rolling his eyes and he's like, okay, Ron, go clean up the Quidditch pitch or whatever. What do you teach again? I don't know. I just think it'd be fun.
Even though I don't think he'd ever do it, Draco is potions master just to have the whole
Oh,
dichotomy of
dear God.
character.
Dear God. Dear God. You get the sense though of all the shit that I give Draco, because I do, and I'm not going to go too far into this, but I think the reason that I can't stand Draco's character so much is because I actually think that he was underserved as a character in the writing, because I think the thing that the fandom that tends to support him, one, I think there's a giant uh faction of them who just love Tom Felton. I think that's a thing.
For sure.
I also think that this fandom has an uncanny ability to essentially headcanon these characters in ways that take them beyond what was actually written on the page. And so they're able to give Draco so much more depth than what he was actually given on the page, and actually give him a, like, quote unquote redemption arc in their own heads that
Hmm.
didn't actually happen in the books. Like, he was very, very underserved, like I said, in my opinion. I think Snape is the same way. I think both of those characters could have been utilized in like in different ways, and made them way more compelling as characters, in my opinion. And I think that's why I get so frustrated with it, because I'm like, but in the word, like, yes, you can contextualize a lot of stuff in your head about them and try to, like, give them that, but the author didn't.
No, for sure. I think, and like I was saying at the beginning of this, I try to break away from the Gryffindor Harry Potter point of view and
Right.
try to take other points of views. But yes, you're right. That's not on the page in the words. That's
Yeah.
me
Hmm.
extrapolating out, different perspectives and histories and backgrounds and thoughts and feelings that I don't know that the character actually had because it's not there.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, but I the that tangent aside, what I was where I was going was to support your thought of him being a potions master. We do, at least on the page, the get a glimpse of the idea of he might actually be good at potions. Potentially, he does at least make it into Newt level classes. um I think we perceive that there's likely a combination of some sort of talent there, and also favoritism by Snape, so it's hard to tell how much of it is really in, like, rooted in him. And we don't really see how he does with Slughorn as a professor, because this is when, like, we don't actually spend that much time with Draco in the classroom and how he's doing. The only time we get with Draco is, hey, Draco's a Death Eater now and nobody believes Harry. And Draco's got other shit on his mind. But you at least see him get that far, so perhaps he has it in him to become Potion's, teacher, and bring this whole sitcom to life. Maybe. Maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe that's giving Draco too much credit. I got to give him some, because at some point in this chapter, and it's not going to take very long, he's getting none. Um, Apparently Ron, though, at this point still has this, like, lingering worry about the Grim, and he's really worried when Harry lets him know that he has actually seen a big black dog, like you said. Um, it's real. That's a real thing. It's just not the sign of his death. At least not yet. I mean, we're all just inching slowly closer to death every day that we breathe, which is an awful way to live and think about life, so I try not to. But technically, Harry is going to die. That's going to
Harry tempts
happen.
death like every year at this school. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's not really a far off prediction.
Yeah, and I just brought this up, what was it? I think it was in I because I took a break from the chapter by chapter stuff. I just posted a, like, 1 through 5 of Prisoner of Azkaban, catching up to this point. And in that, I may or may not have mentioned that it's been okay for Harry to face some semblance of the most evil serial killer in this magical world the past couple of years. But by God, if he wants to go down the street and get some sweets, he better have that permission slip signed by Vernon Dursley. But alas, here we are. We got the big black dog, serious Easter eggs. We're just going to beat you over the head with that one as many times as we possibly can before we actually show that Sirius is a big black dog. But that's not the only Easter egg that's planted here. Hermione storms off saying how great arithmancy was, and Ron's like, she hasn't had that class yet. Something suspicious is happening here. Sorry, I kind of can't with this whole time turner thing. I'm trying to keep this thing on the rails. It's not going well, though, with with it in my brain.
It's early to bring the time travel thing into a storyline. Usually, if you're watching a TV show or something, it's like
Mhm.
later seasons. Like this is like a
That's
book
fair.
6 or book 7 thing, not necessarily a book 3 thing, but
Yeah, and I think to your point, that's why they were all destroyed because it opens up so many issues for things to come in the series where it's like, well, you could have just done a why couldn't you just use a time turner? Because plot and we had to write a book. That's why. That's why we didn't use a time turner for all the things.
I think clearly Voldemort makes a massive mistake by trying to get into the prophecy door when he should have just been trying to get into the time turner door and steal all of them. Like,
Right. Who needs Horcruxes when you can just literally always go back? I wonder if it works on death. Huh. I don't know. Anyway, some nerd wrote that fan fiction too. We can find it at some point. All right, it's time for the fireworks. Let's get to this. Hagrid's first care of magical creatures class as a professor. Which, all right, I thought we were gonna get to the fireworks, but I gotta ask you before we do that. Hagrid as a professor.
it's not great. It's not great. And speaking of professors starting a lesson with a showy lesson, I mean, Trelawney's predicting deaths. McGonagall's transforming herself into an animagus. You got Hagrid pulling out hippogriffs for third years. I can go on for future professors and their showy lessons to begin. We get one in the next chapter, but yeah, it's Lupin. That's Lupin with
Oh
Boggarts,
yeah.
and having children face their darkest fears in a classroom with other children. Whatever, that could have gone terribly wrong. But anyway,
You're not wrong. I hadn't thought of that as much of the showy first class thing until you just said it. I thought of that as more like opportunistic teaching. He's like, oh shit, we've got a boggart. All right, we weren't gonna talk about these till later, but like we have one. Let's use it. But no, you're right. It's a very showy first day.
mm-hmm. Yeah, that lesson could have gone terribly, terribly wrong. I love Lupin, but that could have gone bad. Anyway,
It could have.
so yeah, there's a lot of questionable teaching decisions happening here school wide, but Hagrid seems to make a lot of them, and he knows his profession. He's another one where I think like if he just sticks to what he knows and doesn't try to impress people, he could be really good.
Well, I think that's where Hagrid breaks as a professor, not because he's trying to quote like to me, I don't think it's because he's trying to impress people. I think it's because what he knows are the creatures and he finds them fascinating and he wants to share what he thinks is fascinating with the students. I think that is his motivation and his MO. But here's the problem. The dude was expelled from school when he was like 13 years old. He's not qualified to be a teacher. He doesn't have the education enough himself and the training enough himself of how to actually properly teach children in order to just be thrust into that position. He's set up to fail because he wasn't ever given a chance in the first place himself. He's got the knowledge of the creatures to do a really good job of bringing those creatures to life, quote unquote, I guess. That's a bad way of saying it, but he has no idea how to construct a curriculum or handle a classroom or really even communicate in like a proper way as professor to student. Like there's so many things he just doesn't know, and nobody taught him before he got started. He's just thrown in there to wing it.
Dumbledore runs a very interesting school, and he he doesn't really like. He's the most hands-off principal of all time, where he's just like, yeah, whatever, do whatever you want. It's loosely based on whatever we need to get done.
Yeah.
Uh,
You're
and it
not.
causes some problems.
Well, his main priority is killing Voldemort. So running Hogwarts is kind of just like the thing he does on the side. It's like, they'll be fine. Just somebody tell them not to point the sticks at each other and make them go bang, and everything's going to be okay. I got to deal with this whole serial killer who's invincible thing. Let me focus on that. Alas, the many complexities of Albus Dumbledore. That's why he's my favorite character to talk about in the series. Anyways, fireworks, so many side tangents. First, like, Hagrid's shocked that nobody can figure out how to open their books. Just stroke it. Duh. Obviously.
Yeah, I think Hagrid, I get he thinks the book is funny.
Mhm.
And to him, it's hilarious. But can't you just get a regular book? That
Again.
like,
Also, who wrote this fucking book? Anyway, like,
yeah.
but I think this is so funny because we didn't plan this, right? And I'm sure I'll bring this up at the moment that it happens, but we have a parallel in the two conversations that you and I are going to have today.
Okay.
With this book and something that happens in the chapter we plan to discuss on your podcast.
Okay.
And I'll bring it up again then, but the luck could not have, we are Trelawneying it, I guess is what I'm saying. And Malfoy doesn't have to be a dick about it, but like he's also correct in his like, obviously stroke it. Why didn't I think of that? Like, duh. He doesn't have to be a dick about it, but he's also right. This was stupid.
I mean, Malfoy, especially in Hagrid's class, yeah, he's definitely a dick, but he does bring up some valid points from time to time. And it's like, actually, that was kind of fair. I'm not gonna lie, kind of fair.
That one was fair.
Yeah.
That's the only one I'm giving him. In this chapter.
That's the
only one I'm giving him.
That's fair. Yeah.
Because the rest, nope.
No, that's on you, bud. That's on you. Everything that happens after this is on you.
Yeah. Yep. So we get introduced to hippogriffs, as you mentioned. Buckbeak is the first one, thanks to Harry reluctantly and kind of unknowingly volunteering to go for a bareback ride on a flying bird horse. He's like, yeah, I'll come pet the big winged creature, but he didn't sign up for flying. Just didn't.
Nope. Hagrid's like, you can do it. Here you go.
Yeah, it's like taking a city kid to a rodeo and saying like, oh, nobody's been able to break that stallion over there. Just hop on. Let's see what happens.
All of this reverence that Hagrid like builds for the hippogriff, like you need to bow, you need to maintain eye contact, you need to do this, you need to, and then he just slaps the thing on the end. I'm like, just
throw the guy. Don't make it mad. It will kill you. But let's just throw you on its back and here you go. It's not great. Not a great plan. Not a great plan. Again, too showy. Show them the hippogriffs. Don't actually have them interact with it and have a student flying on one.
Well, and there's like no prep because Hagrid literally says right before this, oh, don't pull out any of his feathers. He won't like that.
What else do you grab?
Where do you hold? I likened it to like a roller coaster, but when the restraint is not like all the way down or a little too loose and you're like, is this supposed to be like this? Like, can we make sure this is good first? Like,
am I gonna die? Does this thing go upside down?
Yeah.
So many things could go wrong. So many things. So many things. Draco, though, hates Harry being the center of attention and decides to ignore all of Hagrid's instructions. And what does he do? Insults Buckbeak and gets a couple of claws for his efforts. Ironically, this is the second time in Draco's life that he got punished for his behavior ever, I think.
Yeah, it just took a hippogriff to do it, not a teacher.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, exactly. This is cause and effect, child, when you don't pay attention. And I say, don't insult the beast and then you insult the people, and that's why I said don't do that. But that's also why you can't have this be your lesson plan. Because these are kids, they're not going to listen. They're going to not listen, and they're going to be shits because they're 13.
I don't know what it is about Slytherins in this series, but the lack of respect towards creatures is prominent, and it comes back and bites them like every time. Like Draco here, Umbridge with the centaurs. I mean, it's like never ending.
Well, I don't know if you've heard this, but Slytherin is the evil house.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
We need them to be evil. And nobody likes somebody that kicks a puppy. And this is the magical version of Slytherin house kicking puppies.
I get, as you said earlier, JK has some issues with filling out backgrounds and the world as a whole. There's got to be one good Slytherin, right? I mean, there's by
Gotta
just
be.
sheer odds. So there's got to be one good person in that house somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's just, we don't ever get them at all.
No, because what we get is stand-ins for them, and people will always use Snape as their like, this is a good Slytherin. And it's like, well, no, he was a shitty person.
Yeah.
He ended up being on the correct side of this particular war, but like, he wasn't a good person. He bullied children as a professor constantly. Like, that's not a good person. Or Slughorn. Slughorn is the good Slytherin. And it's like, yeah, he's also kind of a sleazebag who tries to use relationships with children to his own gain and nurture them as children to be his like trophies. I mean, that's kind of sleazy and gross. Like what we needed was just a person, a normal human being dressed in green who wasn't racist and wasn't metaphorically kicking puppies and wasn't bullying children and wasn't collecting children. We just need, but maybe that's why we know the names of like 7 total.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we only see the evil ones, because that's the part that we have to hate, I guess.
I always joke because sometimes we get time jumps from chapter to chapter where it's like, and 3 months have passed and now we're here at Christmas time or whatever. And I'm like, guys, this was Mandy Brocklehurst's moment. That was her moment to do something in the series. And we just skipped over it. And we don't know. You know, she could have done great in Charms and we just have no idea.
No clue.
Nope.
No clue. Yep. And honestly, if there were good Slytherins, we wouldn't know, because Harry's pretty oblivious to pretty much everything that happens around him at almost all times, unless it's very, very pertinent to the plot that he'd be attentive.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or, again, something that'll happen in your chapter, some very meaningless stuff he totally picks up on, and it's like, what you didn't catch anything important, but you got that anyway. We can't break down the fourth wall too much here. The level of acting, though, that Draco is going through to try to just show how much pain he's in and how much of a drama queen he is about this whole thing, though, is what really sets it off for me.
It's the dying bit, because
if
you're just focused on like, it's a gash in his arm. Like, I get it. The Hippogriff can do damage.
Yeah.
Focus on like, wow, that really hurts. Like, my arm is killing me. The dying is where he's like, come on, man. Okay, calm down. We'll get you fixed up.
Yeah, and it's not going to stop. It's going to be like chapters and chapters from now. He's going to still be, oh, my arm. I almost lost an arm. And I kind of can't. And it's
Harry
like
brings up a good point. He had all of the bones removed from his arm, and he had to regrow those, and those came back very quickly, all things considered. So,
yeah, this is a quick. She probably didn't even have to use magic. She probably had a potion that she just wiped on there, and it was all healed. And I think the way that you described it at the beginning, when I told you to rate his bullying skills, which is still a silly way to start a chapter discussion, is it's very juvenile. It's beneath his like age and level of maturity to react in this way.
Do you think other students, like other Slytherins in that, I get Pansy, who again is brought to the forefront here. Why, I'm not really sure, other than to be like just sympathetic towards Draco. But
Well, and he
there's got
needs
to
a
be
girl. He needs a
like
girl.
Crabbe and Goyle have got to be like, really, like,
I think
dude.
that's why they don't talk.
They're just talking to each other on the side, like over there, being like, "Come on, man."
I don't even think they use. They just it's eye contact. That's all it is. They just look at each other and they just. But our dads know each other, and it's been like this since we were 3.
Yeah, they have to be annoyed by it. They have to be like, "Come on, man." Well, of course, that's why they're the muscle, not him.
Right.
They're the
Right.
tough ones, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's supposed to be the brains. We'll leave that one for now. But eventually it does happen, right?
Yeah,
The way down the line, during Crabbe's demise, that chapter, like they're done with him. They're
yeah.
like, you don't hold you. Clearly, we weren't friends. We were doing this because of who you like, your name and your dad and all of that stuff.
Status. Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's another thing that I would love to just see in Slytherin House. Friends? Does anyone in that house have just friends, just a friendship, or is it literally all status and gain because of that whole cunning thing that they're supposed to have?
It's a weird house when you really look at it, because
Mm-hmm.
it's gives you the impression that it's so cutthroat and so competitive.
Yeah.
And maybe it is like that. Again, we don't really see the Slytherin house all that much, except
No.
through Harry's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it is like that. But from Harry's eyes, Slytherin seems to be a relatively surprisingly united front against every other house.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like an us
So
against the world mentality.
kinda, yeah.
Yeah. And the rest of that world just happens to, you know, not be racist. Anyway. Okay. The chapter ends with the trio taking a trip down to Hagrid's to have a support group while Hagrid is just shit-faced drunk, which is how he's dealing with the Malfoy incident. But I mean, for one, this is problematic. Sure, I know have been people who have brought up Hagrid's drinking, as quite the character flaw, as well as Trelawney's drinking as quite the character flaw. But I mean, in their defense, the school day's over, and this is where they live. So if they want to get tanked in their own house,
and they
they're
live
adults.
very remotely, all things considered. Like one's
Yeah.
up in the North Tower, the other one's off, the actual castle. So I
Yeah.
mean,
He didn't invite children. He was getting drunk in his own house by himself, and it happens to take a lot to do that because he's 8 feet tall and is a professional drinker. But the part that I like the most is not the mini AA meeting that's happening. It's the fact that all it takes for him to completely sober up is for him to just go outside and shove his face in a like vat of water. And it's just like, effects are gone. That's what it is.
wouldn't that be great if that was how the real world worked?
You know, it would. I think it would save a lot of people a lot of headaches and the other things that can come from
DUIs, a lot of
well,
DUIs.
that's a fair point.
I will give Hagrid this. As far as we know, he just gets drunk in his hut. He's not getting drunk and flying Buckbeak around the grounds.
Right. He gets
as
drunk.
far as we're aware.
Right. He drinks in his hut, and he drinks at like the Leaky Cauldron or at like
the Hog's Head or something like that.
Yeah. He goes to the places that you're supposed to drink. He's not drinking in the herbology classroom, you know?
Yeah.
And he's not inviting the children. He's not saying, "Hey kids, come get hammered." Although Half-Blood Prince is a thing that happens, but
that is an exception.
Yeah, yeah, but at that point Harry's like 16, which in these books basically means he's
almost an adult.
Yeah, and drinking's treated a little bit different, I think over their period. But then of course we got to end the chapter. Hagrid is sober now. Magically. It's almost like this is a magic book. And he remembers that like Sirius Black is trying to kill you, Harry. Why are you here? And he starts freaking out and he sends him back to the castle. And that's pretty much the end of the chapter.
Ends very abruptly.
It is a very abrupt ending. That wasn't just me being a little unorganized as a podcast host. This chapter literally just ends abruptly with Hagrid freaking out and sending them away.
Yep, flat cutoff.
Did we miss anything? Do you want to go back and hit anything? Like, did you think of the perfect response to something 5 minutes after it was too late to use it? Like anything?
Nope, I think I got all my Trelawney stuff out, so I think I'm good.
Okay. Good. Let's do some house points before we go. In true Hogwarts fashion, these points are completely subjective with zero oversight whatsoever and fully at my discretion. And yours this week. I'm giving 15 to Harry for having Hagrid's back and successfully riding Buckbeak without dying. And I'm giving 5 for Hermione playing mom and dumping out Hagrid's booze. And that's all
fair.
I could really think of for the entire chapter.
So I was the mean teacher. So I took more points than I gave. I already talked about Sir Cadogan and his minus 10 portrait points.
I did too. I took more. Who did you take from?
I took just 20 from Hermione. I took 20. Your point about her being the mom, though, is accurate. I should give her some for that. But
well, I gave her 5, so she averages out to 15.
Yeah, I took 10 for just being rude in Trelawney's class, and 10 for being closed-minded when Ron is trying to actually be genuinely like sharing his fear and the wizarding world's fear on the Grim, and she's just being completely disrespectful about it. And then 10 for minus 10 for Draco for being disrespectful for hippogriffs, and then plus 10 for Harry for going first. So I'm agreeing with you on there.
Nice.
So Harry comes out the best in this chapter for me, which is not a common thing. So good for Harry.
That's fair. I also took points from Draco. I took 30 because he sucks from beginning to end in this whole chapter. Nope, 30's not enough. Let's go 35. I'm adding 5 bonus for being a pansy ass about the whole Buckbeak thing. Speaking of pansy, give me 10 from Parkinson too.
That's fair.
She's just the worst every time she shows up on the page, and I kind of hate her a lot. So I'm going to be Snape. I'm just going to take points for a child that I hate. That's what I'm going to do right now.
There's a strong case to be made that Pansy's the actual worst Slytherin student. Like, there's a real argument for that. And the small snippets that we get, she is awful. Draco gets more page. Yeah. And Crabbe and Goyle get more page. But for the little bits that we get of Pansy, she's not great.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Here's the line of demarcation. I don't even know if I'm using that correctly. What we see out of the others evolves into literal, like, attempted murder. Right? And so they get to a point where they escalate into the literal, like, worst you can possibly be, throwing around unforgivables, trying to torture people. And
we don't follow Pansy during the Battle of Hogwarts.
Well, that's the thing. What we get from her is just normal, like, teenage girl, the worst.
Yeah, that's true.
She never has the opportunity to evolve or escalate into, like, a mini Bellatrix or something for us to really just, like, viscerally hate. What we see from her at the Battle of Hogwarts is being, like, the first to want to get Harry or whatever. And I know I'm a little bit blurry as to how much of my memory is movie and book on that particular, like, her exact interaction in that moment. We got a ways before I reread that part, but she's prominent in that, but she's never, like, we never see her actually casting spell. I don't think we see her cast a single spell ever in these books.
I think that's true, actually. Yeah.
All we see is her be very snide, very shitty, particularly to people like Hermione, and we see her fawning over Draco, and that's it. We also don't get any inclination that she's connected at all to the Death Eater circle, like through
Yeah.
her relationships. Because like I'm thinking back to Half-Blood Prince where she's like petting Draco, because again he has to have a girl. Everybody has to have every male character in these books has to have a girl, and she's his. But she like where he's talking about like I've got bigger and better things to do than Hogwarts this year, and she's like, oh, do you mean him? Almost like she's like outside of
She's
that
a
circle.
groupie. She's a
Yeah,
groupie. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Anyways, that's enough about that pug. Also, not cast very well. I think that the girl that they got to play her in the movies did a really, really good job, and she does that like mean girl really well, but she was
Mhm.
not nearly ugly enough.
Fair enough.
I'm taking 5 points from Hagrid too for letting his confidence get shook when the kids just couldn't open the book, and then it was just like spiraling down from there. I think that's what I got. So all that leads is our expecto plot changeo question, which I will post on social at Belated Binge across all the things. You know the drill by now. What happens to our story if we make one small change in the chapter we just read? For this one, my question is, what if Harry didn't volunteer to jump in the ring with Buckbeak?
Oof.
Any thoughts from you?
Hagrid's in trouble. I think Hermione probably would. Just and then she would immediately regret it. She would immediately regret it because I don't think she is as adept at that kind of challenge as Harry. Like Harry could be like, how am I going to do? Okay, whatever. I'll figure it out now. Like this exact moment, I'm going to figure it out. And Hermione needs to plan a little bit better. But she would feel bad for Hagrid, so I think she might, or she'll just push Harry forward. Like the whole, like in the movie where they all like take a step back and then Harry's the one. That.
Him being oblivious to everybody else, again, not noticing his surroundings
Correct.
at all, that
Yeah.
he's just the lone one standing there. I like that idea though, that Hermione would like step up for Hagrid, and I think that actually evolves into a completely different way for the chapter to go, and actually a completely different way for the whole book to go. The
Do you
way
think
that
Hagrid? Do you think Hagrid makes her ride the hippogriff?
that's exactly what I don't think he does. I
Yeah.
think he puts Harry on it because it's Harry, and
Harry.
he's confident that Harry can handle this, but I don't think he would do that to Hermione.
I agree. I think
I
that's
think
true.
he would just have her, because I don't think that he intends for all the students to ride the hippogriffs. I think he's just getting them to interact with, and then Harry doesn't become center of attention. Draco doesn't have a reason to get all jealous and puff his chest out and go out of his way to insult the hippogriff. And so maybe Draco doesn't get his ass clawed, and maybe Buckbeak doesn't later get sentenced to death, and maybe we don't have to have that like whole breakout thing, and we have a whole entirely different book. And if Hermione just didn't take frickin' divination, we also wouldn't need the time turner, and we just have a completely different book on our hands. Look at that, full circle. Okay, before we end this, plug anything and everything.
Yeah, so you could find Hogwarts, a podcast, on Instagram and Twitter or X or whatever it's being called now.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's at Hogwarts, a pod. And you know, we're posting a bunch on there. So we post polls. Check us out on Spotify or anywhere you listen to podcasts, and you can find us. We post polls every episode on Spotify, so feel free to comment and participate in those.
Nice. I also love the handle, by the way. Just Hogwarts a pod just rolls off the tongue.
So easy. I was so happy when it worked.
I love it so much. It also feels more creative. For whatever reason, it just I don't know. It's fun for me, and I'm not just kissing your ass because you're on this podcast. The first time I read it, I was just like, that's a great fucking handle. Anyways, seriously, thank you for coming on and doing this. And thank you to the tens of people listening. Please take a minute or less to open up Apple Podcasts. I mean, it's probably going to take you a full minute now because of the glitch that's happening. I still can't get anywhere with support. I'm sorry, but please, for the love of all things, if Apple Podcasts is the thing that you listen on, please have the patience to sit and wait the 20 seconds for the glitch to stop and you can actually listen to my podcast. I don't know what else to say. And please wait that 20 seconds so you can scroll all the way down to leave a review, because that's a really helpful way to get this podcast introduced to new people. And I'll give you a shout out on the podcast, like Cody, who left a 5-star review recently and said that he's been a Potterhead for years, but also didn't read the books until he was, say it with me, kids, a grown-ass man. We're out here. Belated Bingers Unite. He said he loves diving in and theorizing on Dumbledore's influence. A must-listen podcast. Thank you, Cody, and thank you in advance for telling all your Potterhead friends how cool they would be if they joined our belated binge of Harry Potter.